Huber was reported missing after a concert at the Forum. Her abandoned car was found with a flat tire just a few miles from her Newport Beach home.
The frustrations that you go through and the hopes, and then they're dashed and you're up and down, and you always have that concern, what's she going through, where she is.
A 23-year-old woman mysteriously disappeared along a California highway, launching an investigation that would remain unsolved for 3 long years. Despite relentless efforts, there were no leads, no witnesses, no physical evidence, nothing to point investigators in the right direction. That is, until one observant couple noticed a small, seemingly insignificant detail, and the case took a dramatic turn.
He said he moved here 6 months ago from California. Why did he still have that moving truck?
In the summer of 1991, in Costa Mesa, California, police discovered Denise Huber's car abandoned on the roadside. A flat rear tire seemed to explain the sudden stop, and the hazard lights were still flashing, but there was no sign of Denise anywhere. No footprints, no blood, no signs of a struggle, nothing to indicate where she'd gone or what had happened. With no leads and no evidence, investigators could only assume that she had left on foot to look for help and never came back. Denise's car was discovered almost perfectly positioned between 2 payphones, back when, in the absence of cell phones, payphones were a lifeline for roadside emergencies. Yet strangely, there was no trace of her ever using either one.
Shortly thereafter, they brought in canines, and they traced Denise's scent 75 yards from the car. And that was the end of the trail. It appeared that Denise had just totally vanished.
Police suspected that Denise may have been picked up by a passing driver. At that point, it was the most logical theory they had, and they clung to it, hoping it would eventually lead them to the truth about the 23-year-old's sudden disappearance. The following day, dozens of volunteers scoured the area around her abandoned car, searching for any clue that might explain what happened, but found nothing out of the ordinary. With no solid leads, investigators escalated their efforts, deploying aircraft equipped with infrared sensors for an aerial sweep of the region. Still, the search yielded no results. A team of forensic experts meticulously examined every inch of Denise's car, but all the fingerprints they uncovered belonged either to Denise herself or to close family and friends. Investigators then worked to piece together her movements in the hours before she vanished. They learned that Denise had been driving home after attending a rock concert in Los Angeles. She'd gone with a close friend, Rob Calvert, who had managed to get 2 tickets. After the show, the two didn't head straight home. Instead, they stopped by a bar where they ran into another friend. It wasn't until later that night that they all parted ways. That made Rob Calvert the last known person to see Denise Huber before she disappeared. At 2:35 a.m., Denise dropped off Rob at his home and then drove off on her own. The drive from Rob Calvert's house to her parents' place, where she lived, was roughly 12 miles. Yet, for some reason, she never made it that night. Denise was a responsible young woman who had recently finished college. Her parents rarely worried when she spent the night elsewhere, and they didn't when she didn't come home after the concert. They simply assumed that she was staying at a friend's place. But when she still hadn't returned by the next day, their worry began to set in.
When I got up in the morning, I saw that she wasn't home, and Dennis was home that day. So I didn't know anything until I got off work, and then he said, Denise hasn't called. And then it just hit me. Something is wrong.
Denise was always good about keeping her family informed whenever her plans changed. But this time, she didn't, which immediately set off alarm bells. Her family and friends began reaching out to everyone she knew, desperate for any sign of her.
I got a call from Denise's parents, and they asked if I had heard from her or knew where she might be. But I did not know where she was.
Her mom called me and asked if Denise had stayed the night at my house. And of course she hadn't. So I immediately started thinking of people I could call. And I had to track down Rob Calvert's number. He said that she had dropped him off and he didn't think she was going anywhere, but he wasn't sure.
He didn't know anything other than she had dropped him off. And he said that she drove away with a smile on her face.
When her parents realized that no one had seen Denise since that night, they reported her missing to the police. Meanwhile, one of her closest friends retraced the route Denise would have taken home, and that's when she stumbled upon the abandoned car by the highway. The shocking discovery left Denise's loved ones devastated and frightened.
When we looked inside, there was a pair of pantyhose on the seat in the front. She would often take them off on the way home, just to be more comfortable. But it seemed kind of odd. That was the only thing that was there. Her keys and her purse were not in the car. I don't know what's going on. It was just such a hopeless feeling.
Denise's parents urgently appealed to the public for any information about their daughter, convinced that anyone must have witnessed something. Despite nearly 1,000 vehicles passing that stretch of highway every hour, no one had come forward.
So Denise's car had been sitting there for almost 24 hours, and the flashers had been on, but nobody called in to report the abandoned car. I guess people just thought it was a normal car problem, but for us, it was the beginning of a very, very tragic case.
The Costa Mesa police formed a detective team to focus on the investigation, making it a priority to question the last person known to have seen Denise. Rob Calvert described their relationship as close friends with similar musical interests. He also revealed that he was attracted to her and wouldn't have minded turning their friendship into something more romantic.
Some people were thinking that maybe he tried something with her and she rejected him, and so he was angry and did something to her.
Rob willingly agreed to take a polygraph test during his interview and passed without any issues. The results confirmed he was telling the truth, and police officially ruled him out as a suspect. At the same time, the public was doing everything they could to help authorities locate Denise Huber. Everyone seemed to have a theory about what might have happened, but the most popular one was that she had simply run away. Among those who believed this was Greg, a mutual friend of Denise and Rob, the same person they'd run into at the bar after the concert. That made Greg the second to last known person to see Denise before she disappeared. Greg, like Rob, didn't hesitate when asked to take a polygraph test, and he passed it without any issues. Detectives also spoke at length with those closest to Denise and came to a clear conclusion. She had no known enemies and no one with a motive for revenge. They interviewed her family, friends, co-workers, and even casual acquaintances, and not a single person had anything negative to say about her. As the investigation progressed, suspicion toward those in Denise's inner circle was fully ruled out. With no strong leads, detectives expanded their scope and began looking into individuals recently released on parole, especially those with a history of similar crimes. But like every other effort up to that point, the search turned up nothing. Police began to fear they were dealing with the worst-case scenario.
The worst thing was when they put the helicopters up in the air. And that helicopter just kept going around and around and around, and you know what they're looking for. They're looking for a body. They're not looking for a person.
The investigation into Denise Huber's disappearance had completely stalled. Every clue they had was either too vague or unreliable, and even their leading theory, that she had been abducted from the side of the highway, was little more than a speculation. With no eyewitnesses, no forensic evidence, and nothing concrete to follow up on, the case grew colder by the day. Weeks turned into months, and months into a full year. By that point, investigators had exhausted every possible lead, no matter how small.
I feel like I was in kind of a daze, and I was frightened, and it was very difficult.
Denise's family put up a massive banner overlooking the exact spot where her abandoned car had been found, hoping it might trigger someone's memory. In addition, her family also distributed thousands of similar flyers and stickers.
I held out hopes that we could find her, because I did not want to accept the opposite, that she was no longer with us.
Her parents even offered a $10,000 reward for any fresh leads on their daughter's whereabouts, but despite their tireless and heartbreaking efforts, nothing brought them closer to answers. The police, too, refused to give up. They followed every single lead, no matter how far-fetched it seemed. At one point, they received a report about human remains discovered in the desert, 150 miles from where Denise had lived. Investigators rushed to check it out, fearing the worst. Fortunately, it wasn't her. Having lost all hope, the police even brought in psychics to help with the case. When one claimed Denise was submerged at the bottom of a nearby lake, a team of divers was dispatched to search, but that too proved fruitless. Denise's family hired private investigators, but they returned with no answers. In their desperation, her parents were even targeted by scammers pretending to be kidnappers, trying to profit from their grief. Reports about Denise's possible location started pouring in from all over the state, but each tip became less credible than the last. Theories ranged from human trafficking to cult involvement, with some even suggesting that Denise had orchestrated her own disappearance. A second year went by, then a third, with Denise nowhere to be found. Every year on the anniversary of her disappearance, her parents would appear on camera, making emotional appeals for any information that could lead to their daughter.
Denise was the light of our lives, and she brought us nothing but joy and happiness. And now that's been taken away.
Around that time, police launched one last attempt to move the case forward. They deployed a female undercover officer to the same highway where Denise's car had been abandoned, pretending to be a driver with car trouble. It was a classic setup, a bait operation meant to draw out a possible suspect, but the tactic led nowhere. No one took the bait, and the investigation remained at a standstill. Then finally, after more than 3 long years of frustration and dead ends, it seemed like luck was finally on the investigators' side. Almost 400 miles away in Prescott, Arizona, a married couple named the Courts, owners of a small paint supply shop, were setting up shop at a local market. There, they got to know a man selling a similar line of paint products. His name was John Familaro, a local house painter. The Courts and Familaro would run into each other most weekends. They weren't particularly close, but they always exchanged a few polite words whenever they crossed paths. On July 19th, 1995, Familaro offered to sell the Courts a large batch of leftover paint he no longer needed. The price was good, so the couple agreed and followed him back to his house to pick it up. When they arrived, they parked beside a large moving truck from the Ryder Rental Company. As they finished packing up the supplies and were about to head out, the Courts noticed something odd. The truck hadn't moved in so long that grass had started growing up around the tires.
As we got in our truck, my husband said, he moved here 6 months ago from California. Why did he still have that moving truck?
He said, I think it is probably stolen. Just write down the numbers on the truck. I think that Ryder'd be tickled to death to get the stolen truck back.
The following day, Jack and Elaine Court shared their concerns with a police officer they knew personally. Intrigued, he ran the truck's license plate, and sure enough, the truck had been reported stolen 6 months earlier. A sheriff's deputy was quickly sent to the property to investigate. The Ryder truck was parked in the driveway, surrounded by several containers filled with unknown chemicals. Although the vehicle was locked, the officer noticed an orange extension cord running from the vehicle into the nearby house. That immediately raised suspicions. It looked like the truck could be a mobile lab used for manufacturing illegal substances. John Familaro wasn't home at the time, but rather than wait for his return, the officer called in the narcotics unit to inspect the vehicle more closely.
Having a probable cause to call it a locksmith, they take the lock off and they lift up the roll-up doors, and the first thing they see is this large, white, deep freezer that's connected to the orange electrical cord.
The woman living next door turned out to be John Familaro's mother, and it was her electricity that had been powering the freezer inside the stolen truck.
Here is the freezer, as you can see.
At first, officers assumed it was just being used to store more chemicals, but when they opened it, they found only one thing: a large black trash bag.
So at this point, let us open up the freezer
and see what we have inside.
What was inside that plastic bag, however, was beyond anything they were prepared for.
I thought this was going to be a deer or an elk because there's so many people that hunt in, rural Arizona.
But what they uncover is far more shocking.
When we cut the plastic bag open and peeled it back, I could see an arm. And as we began to open the bag more, it appeared to be a young adult female because I could see that the long fingernails manicured, and the upper part of the body had a white plastic bag over the head.
Inside the bag was the naked body of a woman, her wrists bound behind her back with handcuffs. The freezing temperatures had preserved her so well that investigators were able to obtain usable fingerprints. They ran them through the missing person database, and within 24 hours, the match came in. Detectives in Costa Mesa received the call they never thought would come. After years of chasing dead ends in the mysterious disappearance of 23-year-old Denise Huber, they suddenly learned the truth. The body in the freezer belonged to Denise Huber.
I'm in my office one day and I get a phone call from Lieutenant Scott Masher from the Yavapai County Sheriff's Department in Arizona. And he asked if we had a missing person by the name of Denise Huber. I was surprised, and I answered, yes, of course I had.
People who knew John Famularo were shocked by the news. To his neighbors, he had always seemed like a quiet, reserved man, the kind you'd never suspect of something so horrific. His mother firmly believed he was a kind and respectable son and simply couldn't accept that he might be capable of such a terrible crime. Famularo worked as a house painter, a job that brought him into contact with all kinds of people. Still, none of his clients had ever reported anything strange or unsettling about him. Detectives also spoke with several women he had dated over the years. Many described him as charming, even magnetic, able to make a strong first impression. But as each relationship progressed, they all eventually came to the same uneasy realization. Something about him felt off. Luckily, none of them stayed around long enough to discover just how dangerous he really was. While searching John Famularo's home in Arizona, detectives found Denise Huber's clothes and personal belongings, and, disturbingly, not just hers. A large stash of weapons was uncovered, along with piles of newspaper clippings reporting on Denise's disappearance. But the most horrifying discovery came when investigators entered Famularo's home office. There, they found chilling details of what had happened. Denise had been handcuffed, her eyes taped shut. A gag had been forced into her mouth, which was then sealed with duct tape. The autopsy revealed she had been tortured. A brutal blow from a blunt object had crushed her skull, killing her instantly. But that wasn't all. Her body showed signs of at least 30 additional blows. Blood-stained tools were found throughout the home, including a hammer. Investigators also uncovered physical evidence identifying the exact location where the murder had taken place. A receipt for the freezer revealed critical information, specifically the date and location of its purchase. That trail led detectives to a large warehouse in the southern part of Orange County, where the appliance had been delivered. A detailed forensic sweep of the property confirmed their worst suspicions. The building's drywall and wooden framework were saturated with blood, undeniable evidence that this was where Denise had been brutally attacked. Yet, even in the face of overwhelming evidence, John Famularo never confessed to the crime. As a result, investigators were forced to reconstruct the events themselves and piece together the horrifying truth of what happened to Denise Huber. Famularo was cruising the California highway with a chilling intent. He was searching for his next victim. At the same time, Denise was just trying to head home. A flat tire forced her to pull over, and as the 23-year-old made her way toward a nearby payphone to call for help, her path tragically crossed with John Famularo. He used his charm to gain her trust and offered her a ride, but once she got into his vehicle, the situation turned violent. He attacked her, then transported her to a warehouse, where he handcuffed and SA'd her. After carrying out his horrific crime, he ended her life with a hammer. Then, in a final act of cruelty, he chose not to dispose of her body, but to preserve it, hiding her remains in a freezer. For 3 long years, the truck, hiding its gruesome secret, sat in the driveway of John Famillaro's Arizona home. It wasn't until the sharp eyes and concern of 2 everyday citizens, Jack and Elaine Court, cracked the case and led investigators to Denise Huber's frozen body in Famillaro's backyard. Tragically, the ending to this story was just as devastating as many had feared.
We really hoped and prayed that they would find Denise Huber alive, but they didn't. And not only she was not alive, but she died a horrific death.
The mystery behind the 23-year-old's disappearance turned out to be the work of a true monster. In June 1997, John Famillaro was charged with the kidnap, rape, and murder of Denise Huber. He was sentenced to the maximum penalty under the law.
During the trial, John Famillaro sat there impassively, looked unemotional. When the jury announced their verdict after less than 6 hours as guilty and a death penalty, he just kind of lowered his head a little bit and then just went back to the way he'd been the entire time, completely without emotion.
To this day, John Famillaro awaits execution at San Quentin State Prison in California.
He did get the death penalty and it still hasn't happened, so at least he's sitting in prison, hopefully thinking about what he's done.